Picture this. You slip through a door not meant to open into the Vatican's private chambers. The year is 1501 AD. The air is thick. Your heart is pounding. At first you expect prayer, perhaps solemn hymns. Instead you witness what no eyes should ever see within these holy walls. You have stumbled upon the night that Rome itself would try to forget. The Banquet of Chestnuts, the most scandalous evening in papal history. You see silk tossed aside, candles moved to the floor, courtesans crawling like dancers in a grotesque performance. And at the centre sits Pope Alexander VI, watching, smiling. The Banquet of Chestnuts wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a systematic Borgia strategy combining intimidation, blackmail and spectacle. Their masterstroke, having the church's own officials meticulously record these crimes. Why would history's most corrupt family document their wrongdoing? The answer reveals a terrifying truth about power that still applies today. So, before we unpack this scandalous story, do me a favour, hit that like button if you enjoy these darker dives into history, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable. Rome in 1455. A young Spanish cardinal named Rodrigo Borgia rides into the city with a calculating gaze and ambitions that have nothing to do with salvation. He didn't come to save souls, he came to build an empire. The church at this time functioned like a spiritual stock exchange, where indulgences and bishoprics traded hands for gold. But Rodrigo saw something more valuable than money: permanent dynastic power. His uncle, Pope Calixtus III, handed him his first cardinal's hat at age 25, a blatant act of nepotism even by Renaissance standards. But Rodrigo didn't stop there. Within a decade he'd accumulated over 20 ecclesiastical offices across Europe, from Valencia to Portugal. These weren't spiritual appointments, they were revenue streams. One contemporary account describes how he'd lease out his benefices like rental properties, collecting income while others did the actual work. By 1492, after bribing his way through the papal conclave, Rodrigo emerged as Pope Alexander VI. The Vatican now operated like a family business. His son Cesare became a cardinal at 18 despite having no theological training. Daughter Lucrezia's marriages were arranged like corporate mergers, each one advancing Borgia political interests. Even the papal apartments were remodelled, not for prayer, but to accommodate private meetings with bankers and mistresses. What made the Borgias different from other corrupt Renaissance families wasn't their greed, it was their system. They turned church corruption into a scalable operation. Financial records show they sold ecclesiastical offices through bidding wars, with prices fluctuating like modern stocks. When Cardinal Ascanio Sforza traded his vote for Rodrigo's papal bid, he received 4 mule loads of silver and the lucrative office of Vice-Chancellor. By the time Alexander VI donned the papal tiara, the Vatican had effectively become Borgia Incorporated. The family controlled territory from Rome to Naples, with private armies and a network of spies. But absolute control requires more than wealth. It demands that everyone knows crossing you means ruin, which is why the Vatican's secret chronicler Johann Burchard kept detailed records of every banquet, bribe and murder. Power wasn't just about what the Borgias did, it was about who knew about it. Rome, June 1497. The body of Juan Borgia floats in the Tiber, his silk garments tangled in the reeds, 9 stab wounds turning the river water pink behind the Castel Sant'Angelo. As the papal guards pull the corpse ashore, every cardinal in Rome holds their breath, waiting for the explosion of vengeance. But what happens next reveals the Borgia playbook in action. Alexander VI wept publicly for days. His grief so raw, Vatican scribes recorded him moaning like a wounded bull. He delivered blistering sermons about reforming the church's morals and launched investigations into his favourite son's murder for exactly 3 weeks. Then suddenly his other son Cesare resigned as cardinal, an unprecedented move, and took command of the papal armies. The reforms vanished. The investigation stopped. Johann Burchard's diary notes how Alexander used Juan's death to remove obstacles. The Pope authorised Cesare to seize property from noble families complicit in the murder, never producing evidence. When the Orsini family protested, their palaces were confiscated. Witnesses who claimed to see masked men dump Juan's body suddenly died in street brawls. The Borgias didn't just weather the scandal, They engineered outcomes where every development tightened their grip. By 1500, Cesare led military campaigns as papal legate while still wearing cardinal's crimson beneath his armour. He negotiated treaties not with bishops but with mercenary captains. When Alexander needed to intimidate the College of Cardinals, he had Cesare ride into meetings fully armed. The message was clear: spiritual authority now answered to military might. The brilliance wasn't in committing crimes, every Renaissance pope did that, but in making sure everyone knew. When a rival cardinal joked about the suspicious deaths around Cesare, his poisoned wine killed him within hours. The Borgias wanted witnesses. They needed their rivals to see their spies whispering in ears at mass, to notice the same servants appearing at both banquets and assassinations. This cultivated a climate where questioning the Borgias seemed more dangerous than accepting their corruption. By the time autumn 1501 arrived, their dominance was so complete they could orchestrate an event that would make Juan's murder look tame. October 31st, 1501, candles gutter in the Vatican's Sala dei Pontefici as 50 courtesans enter without clothing, their bare feet silent on the marble floors. The Banquet of Chestnuts starts normally enough: silver plates of roasted game, Venetian goblets brimming with wine. But when servants dump a pile of chestnuts between the tables and Alexander VI announces prizes for whoever can couple with the most women, this becomes something history won't forget. Every cardinal present faces an impossible choice: refuse to participate and risk Cesare's soldiers paying a midnight visit to their palazzo, join in and become complicit in an act so egregious even Renaissance Rome might balk. Johann Burchard, the Vatican's master of ceremonies, records it all in detached Latin: servants tallying sexual encounters on parchment, clergymen stumbling drunk through darkened corridors, the Pope watching from his throne while tossing chestnuts at the most vigorous participants. Modern archaeologists studying the Apostolic Palace found something revealing. These events only happened in rooms with double-walled construction. The same thick stone that kept conclaves secret also muffled the sounds of these orgies. Location mattered. Holding it inside sacred space turned transgression into sacrilege, making every attendee an accomplice. But here's what's more shocking than the acts themselves. Burchard's diary entry reads like an official report, not a hidden tell-all. The Borgias wanted this recorded. They needed every cardinal to know their darkest secrets existed in Vatican records, ready to be leaked if they stepped out of line. Power wasn't just about what people did for you. It was about what you could make them do again. By dawn, chestnuts crunch underfoot like broken vows as servants help intoxicated cardinals into their coaches. The event serves its real purpose. No one in that room can ever claim moral authority against the Borgias again. But Alexander and Cesare overlook one fatal flaw. You can only push humiliation so far before even fear turns to rage. Within 2 years, a different banquet would unfold in the Vatican, one where the Borgias wouldn't control the guest list. Florence, 1502. Niccolo Machiavelli watches Cesare Borgia strangle a rebellious noble with his bare hands during a supposedly diplomatic dinner. This moment becomes chapter 7 of The Prince, not as a condemnation, but as an instruction manual. The Borgias didn't pioneer political corruption, they systemized it. Take Lucrezia Borgia's marriages, each one a leveraged buyout disguised as a wedding. Her first husband, Giovanni Sforza, became useless when the Milanese alliance soured. So Alexander VI had the marriage annulled by threatening witnesses to testify. Giovanni was impotent. Husband number 2, Alfonso of Aragon, lasted until Cesare decided Naples was inconvenient. Crossbowmen attacked him in St. Peter's Square, finishing the job in his sickbed. By the third marriage, the entire College of Cardinals understood these weren't unions, they were hostile takeovers. The Vatican's financial ledgers from this period read like a modern corporate prospectus. When Alexander needed funds for Cesare's wars, he didn't raise taxes, he monetized salvation. The 1501 Jubilee generated 200,000 ducats from pilgrims buying indulgences. Church offices sold at monthly auctions, with bidding wars for bishoprics. One memorandum shows 3 cardinals conspiring to split dioceses like investors dividing a bankrupt company's assets. This system thrived on predictable human weakness, fear and greed. But it had one flaw. The Borgias mistook control for invincibility. When they poisoned Cardinal Michel for his wealth in 1503, they didn't account for his nephew keeping detailed accounts of the theft. When Alexander forced bankers to loan millions, he ignored their ledgers recording every coerced transaction. The very documentation that enabled their power became evidence waiting to be weaponized. What makes the Borgia blueprint endure isn't its cruelty, it's its scalability. Modern authoritarians still follow the playbook: spectacular displays of dominance to awe followers, meticulous record-keeping to trap collaborators, and the calculated use of humiliation to break resistance. But like all systems built on escalating excess, it contained the seeds of its own destruction, because eventually someone always decides the cost of compliance outweighs the cost of rebellion. When Alexander VI fell ill after a 1503 dinner, even his physician noted something odd. The Pope kept demanding to review his wills and account books instead of receiving last rites. He died staring at ledgers that documented every sin, every theft, every betrayal. The numbers didn't lie. They never do. August 1503. A swollen corpse turns black on a Vatican dining table so bloated attendants can't fit it into its coffin. Alexander VI's death mirrors his reign, messy, excessive, and impossible to ignore. The Borgia system collapsed within months as cardinals burned incriminating ledgers and Rome celebrated in the streets. Their fatal miscalculation? Believing control of information meant control of history. Those meticulous records they used to blackmail allies became their indictment. 5 centuries later, their playbook persists: coercion through spectacle, power through complicity. The only difference now? Our modern power brokers are better at hiding their banquets. Their chestnuts come with non-disclosure agreements.